always wondered is, where did I come from and who are my parents?
Your parents were myself and a tree. I created you by applying magic and various chemicals to a bit of moldy, slimy fungus that was inside of an old dead tree. There's not much of a story to your backstory. Hey, don't look at me for backstories. My father was a very strict but very talented photographer. There's not really much to tell, really. Kind of a boring story, not a whole lot happens in it. But you know what I would really like to figure out? What was the backstory of Applejack's parents? Now there's a question that every pony's been asking for at least the past 7 years or so. Does any pony know exactly what happened to them? I do. I have the whole story right here. I just went back to the past and came from the past back to the future, and now I have the whole story of the Apple family right here. Great Scott, I think you need to watch it. Wow, that was perhaps one of the best, most touching, most emotional episodes of the entire series. Probably because of how many years we've been waiting to hear the story. I mean, a lot of stuff that's been happening recently, like Applejack's parents and Celestia and Luna having a focused story on them, the Cutie Mark Crusaders getting their Cutie Marks, Rainbow Dash entering the Wonderbolts. This is all stuff we've wanted to happen for a long time, but really part of the whole payoff is just how long we've been waiting. If we hadn't been waiting for so long, the question wouldn't be nagging at us, and we wouldn't keep asking without getting an answer, and we wouldn't be having this emotional connection of finally the answer. So, in part, it is the time we've waited for the answer that causes the story to be great. And these are certainly not stories that I would start off first if I'd never heard stories from Equestria before. You really do need the build-up of several years' worth of stories to make these emotions hit exactly this hard. Anyhow, shouldn't you be recapping that story I just told you off-screen? Yes, of course. Things started with Apple Bloom looking to buy some pear butter from a new farmer who's a new face in Ponyville. Turns out he's actually a returning old face to Ponyville, just some pony that Apple Bloom's never met before. He used to apparently live around the area some long time ago. Grandpear, as his name is, and he has a very familiar name. Almost like someone that should be boldly going where no pony has gone before.
Are you saying that ponies don't go to Vancouver very often?
Oh, anyhow, Grandpear gives Apple Bloom a free sample of his pear jam, and she runs home and tells Applejack and Big Mac about the perfect topping for their pancakes that she just got. When they realize it was pear butter, Applejack freaks out and hides the jar before Granny Smith can see it, knowing that Granny Smith gets very emotional when they talk about the pears and the feud that they had with the apples, and never wants to talk about the story. Having brought this to Apple Bloom's attention, she becomes curious about what the feud was about, and if maybe it was a misunderstanding that can be resolved. The only pony they know that has the answer is Goldie Delicious. So, one off-screen ride and an off-screen tourist of Apples Forever, and we arrive at Goldie Delicious's. Hopefully without having to take a river rafting ride through the scariest cave in Equestria again, and hopefully they didn't again overpack the wagon and have it break down on their way. But they go all the way out to Goldie Delicious's. She tells them the story and reveals, shockingly, that Applejack, Big Mac, and Apple Bloom's parents were from one member of the Apple family, and their mother was from the Pear family, making them half pear. The whole shocking revelation was never revealed to the Apples because the mother's cutie mark was a jar of pear butter, and it looks absolutely no different from apple butter when it's just a cutie mark, so no clues there. And she was never called Pear Butter, but instead referred to as Buttercup, a nickname given to her by their father at a very young age.
And it's really kind of weird that the babies at this age are talking in such mature voices.
I don't know, maybe it's like a Rugrats kind of thing. Well, anyhow, the rest of the story continues when they have to go to another pony who knew their father for more of the details. We hear about how Bright Mac and Pear Butter were getting along and becoming romantic with each other as they continued to grow up and strengthen their relationship. One day while in a plow race, Bright Mac crashed into Grand Pear's water tower and caused it to flood the field. When Grand Pear got angry and asked for answers, Bright Mac was honest about it. Honest, just like his daughter Applejack would be. Later, the story continues thanks to Mrs. Kate, who we also get some of her backstory and learn her maiden name before she was married. And we find out that the Apple family's mother was a lot like Apple Bloom in that she had a talent for helping ponies discover their cutie marks. We get Mrs. Kate to recap another romantic moment from the Apples' parents' past as they have a picnic and share some romantic time together. Then she recaps another romantic moment where Pear Butter revealed her love for Bright Mac in the form of a song. That song montages through several moments of their blossoming relationship. This is one of the more beautiful and lovely songs in all of Equestria. It's very emotional and moving, and the memories that we see during the song of the parents' blooming relationship as it grows over time, these are all really beautiful, emotional, touching moments from their life, and we really see romance being done right. It's not that often we get a real true romance in ponies around Equestria, but we see it here with these two. We've seen it with Big Mac and Sugar Belle, and we kind of had something that was actually more or less one-sided between Applejack, Rarity, and Trenderhood. And then other than that, there was Trent and Matilda, whose romance we barely saw, and Shining Armor and Cadence, whose romantic moments we see mostly after the wedding, because before the wedding we didn't know anything about them, and it sort of came out of the blue. But this Apple family romance is perhaps the best done romance we've ever seen, and we truly feel the love of the two parents-to-be. And the whole thing ends with one more story from Mayor's perspective of how the wedding went down. How the wedding was interrupted by Granny Smith and Grandpa yelling at their kids and forbidding them to get married, but it's too late, they already are married. And when Pear Butter is forced to choose between her family and the Apple family, she stays with the Apple family. Grandpa rejects his daughter and runs off, while Granny Smith accepts her into the family and comforts her in a time of emotional need. I think this is a moment that displays why the map of friendship table is really, truly needed. You see, nowadays when things like this happen, the table map will just summon the 6 friends together and their cutie marks will flash and they'll be sent off someplace in Equestria to deal with arguments exactly like this one and try to mend friendships before they break apart. But here we see the exact situation where Twilight and her friends would have been summoned to as the friendships between the families fall further and further apart and eventually end in disaster as Grandpa abandons his own daughter and later in old life has regrets. But since Twilight isn't around at this point in history and the elements of harmony have been turned into stone and fallen silent after the banishment of Nightmare Moon, there's no pony to represent the elements and go on special table missions to help fix this relationship before it gets to this point. This really is why the table map is so important. It's to prevent things like this from happening. And I imagine if the elements of harmony had been around and Luna and Celestia had not been banished, that the elements could have been inherited from Celestia and Luna and perhaps passed down. Maybe Bright Match would have been the holder of the element of honesty, and then some other ponies we don't know about yet would have had the other elements. Just something to think about. I also enjoyed the fact that if you pay attention during this story, Twilight Sparkle actually appears as a background pony during an Apple Family related episode. Normally it's Applejack in the background of Twilight's story, but for once in her life it's Applejack front and center while Twilight gets pushed to the brief background and barely gets noticed. A fun little twist, if you asked me. And it was really great getting to learn not just the Apple parents' backstory, but also Mrs. Tate and some other things. And if you pay attention, all of the important characters are set up in the background long beforehand. This is one of the best episodes of the series, but mainly because of how long we've gone without hearing this story. And this story is perhaps one of the best told and the best emotionally as well, and with one of the best songs ever also. And so glad and so relieved that it was so beloved by so many. If this had been a horrible episode, it would have completely ruined things like Newbie Dash did. This is great storytelling, and I think it almost had to be. That's all I have to say about that, and thank you for watching, and good night.
Nothing grows like they used to when you were here, except my little sister. You'd be so proud. She's got mama's eyes